Welcome back to BOL on YouTube. It is a Monday morning, June the 24th, 2024. Travis Reier, senior analyst alongside site publisher. Right there next to me is the one, the only, the incomparable Tim Watts. And of course, down there in the center square, we have senior recruiting editor Andrew Bone. Guys, you think we got anything to talk about on this Monday? Based on the nuggets and everything else you provided, Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays, but BOL's nuggets are 7 days a week, as we've shown in the past. Put it on the t-shirts, right? But certainly a lot to talk about. Micah DeBose, the elite offensive lineman from Viger High School, commits to Alabama in a one-of-a-kind type of announcement, guys. I don't know if I've seen that one before. But it just continues this momentum, especially at the offensive line position. And Tim, we'll start with you. You've kind of outlined this for a few weeks, and it looks like your magic 8 ball is working quite well.
I mean, we knew the dominoes had to fall the correct way, but to get the right guys, but so far they have. I mean, if you look at what they wanted to do, Micah was a big one. People wondering how highly was he recruited. The number one team in the recruiting ranking team in the country, Ohio State, wanted him. The number two, LSU wanted him. LSU Bengal Tigers wanted him. He committed to number three, and he was committed to number four, Georgia, earlier in the process before decommitting and opening it up. So this is a highly coveted guy. We went over it a few times. Can't say it enough, but the Bama staff did a really good job of walking this down. I think they were among the favorites off and on, but I think they did a fantastic job of walking this down, getting back in, and then to get him to commit the way he did was pretty impressive. And
Andrew,
Of course, Ryan Williams is involved. So
absolutely. I mean, at this point, he deserves like a support staff title or something. Some type of recruiting title. Andrew, we talked about this in the immediate aftermath of Micah DeBose's commitment on Saturday, but just wanted to see if you had any residual thoughts that maybe you've come up with here in the last 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Micah DeBose, it was a long roller coaster ride with him. I mean, it started when he committed to Georgia last January. A lot of schools continued to recruit him, including Alabama. The previous staff was all over him. They were really pushing hard. Auburn was pushing hard last fall, and then it was LSU, and then it was Ohio State, and now he settles on Alabama. So I think it was just a great job by Coach Cap, Coach DeBoer, the entire staff. I mean, Coach DeBoer, the first day he went on the recruiting trail for Alabama, so it was about a week and a half after he officially arrived at Alabama. The coaching staff went out on the road. One of the first stops was in Mobile. They went to Viger High School, and they met with Micah and, let him know, you're a top target for us. We're going to recruit you. And, of course, they had a different offensive line coach at the time, and Scott Huff. But then Coach Cap comes in. Micah visits early April. That was the first time they had a chance to meet. Really hit it off well then. He came back in May. I think then when he took that official visit to LSU, and there was a lot of buzz coming out after that LSU visit that Micah was leaning towards the Tigers. About 2 days later, he was in Tuscaloosa, came back for an unofficial visit, had a great time. There was a lot of momentum there with Alabama, really for the rest of the month. And Tim mentioned this the other day that some of the schools felt like they were in a good position with him, but he was talking to Alabama during a lot of those visits, and letting them know he was still excited about Alabama and was excited about the weekend visit this past weekend, and comes in and makes that announcement on Ryan Williams' Instagram. So maybe we'll see more of those, but credit to Ryan for getting a lot of attention on Micah on Saturday night.
And hey, does that sound familiar? One of his first stops was Mobile, Alabama, after getting his job. Does that sound familiar?
Sounds a
2008.
little bit. It sounds a
Nick
little bit like Nicholas Lou
Nick
Saban, doesn't it?
Saban making
Yeah.
a beeline down there, working on some guys committed. And if you remember, not only did that pay fruitful, starting with B.J. Scott and everybody that came, but they also ended up with Phelan Jones, who had transferred, who they had missed on initially. So good point there that they both went to the same area. They kind of know they either like the beach or know there's some prospects down there.
That's where it all starts, it seems like, right? For Alabama recruiting, both past and present. We appreciate, by the way, everyone checking in as we get going on the latest installment of BOL on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. And be sure to hit that like button for us. That would help us out tremendously. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel. That would be great. And turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here on the YouTube home for BOL. And of course, these guys do a tremendous job on these segments, but it's kind of a scratching the surface situation. So if you want the full Monty, you want the full effect of what they bring to the table, the round table on a daily basis, then BamaOnLine.com is where you need to be. We have the official visit special. It rages on $1 for 1 month. Come on. I mean, 50 cents for each of these guys. Are you kidding me? That's a bargain. Absolutely. You need to take advantage of
30 cents, 70 cents for me, 30 cents to Andrew.
I mean, that's Costco recruiting, right? I mean, come on.
Costco. That's Costco recruiting.
That's DG recruiting. Come on.
The old Dollar General.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm worth $1 a month.
I
agree.
Opinions vary, but I would go along with that, Andrew. No doubt about it. And one of our viewers here, Keith Jones, in the chat, the show chat, which we certainly encourage you to take part in that as well. Hit us up in the show chat. Keith refers to Coach Cap, the offensive line coach for Alabama at this point, Tim, as the silent assassin. And again, the narratives, right, with this staff, with Kalen DeBoer, and with the changes to the offensive side of the ball that you had almost immediately at offensive coordinator, at offensive line, a couple of guys staying back in the Pacific Northwest to coach with the Seattle Seahawks. Kapilovic and the offensive line, it's been amazing to watch, and it's not done yet, I don't think, either.
I was fortunate enough to know some of the guys that had coached with him previously. And I'm telling you, the guy reminded me similar to Charles Kelly. Both have great feedback, easy guys to work with, hard, mind their business, do their job. Well, that's what it was said about Coach Cap. Everybody across the board liked him. When he came, we covered the fact that he called. He wasn't at Baylor very long, but he called each and every one of the coaches to tell them he appreciated getting to know him and thank you and why he was leaving. So obviously a guy, and he also connects really well, obviously, with the parents and the players. Then you throw in Courtney Morgan, Kalen DeBoer. I mean, we said it the whole time. That was the focus of the offensive line. They've done a great job.
What about it, Andrew? I know you've alluded to, you've just outright mentioned Cap and the effect he's had. And I don't know if anyone expected to reach this point, especially with a guy like Ty Haywood still out there, a 5-star offensive tackle who we're seeing some of our national guys in the last couple of days go ahead and put in RPMs for Alabama for the outstanding Texan offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think that Coach Cap has certainly done a tremendous job in such a short period of time. Yeah, he wasn't hired at Alabama until February the 19th. So, and we were in the middle of the dead period. It just kind of started. So he didn't get a chance to really see and meet a lot of these kids until late March or April. So I think the way that he's been able to develop relationships with families, with these players, and, somebody like Ty Haywood, that's the guy that he's known for a long time, recruited him when he was at Baylor. Even though he's only at Baylor for about a month and a half, he went and saw him. He met him and formed that relationship. So there were some connections before his arrival. But I think with Coach Cap, they really focused in on a small group of offensive linemen, from the get-go. And, they prioritize those guys. They focus on them. They push for them. And, you see the results. They've got 4 offensive line commitments right now. They are heavily involved with a few others, and we feel like they're going to certainly close with 5 total.
Yeah, it is just shaping up to be a one-of-a-kind sort of offensive line class. Guys, we've been around this stuff for 20-plus years. Covered a lot of official visit stretches, going back to our day. That was typically more so in January than June. We've certainly seen a shift in that with the change in the recruiting calendar. But have you ever seen anything like what we've seen during these 4 weeks, going back to late May into June? 8 new commitments, an Elite 11 MVP among them, and this sort of wall that we've alluded to in the past that Coach Cap seems to be putting together here pretty quickly. It's unprecedented, I think, Tim, in a lot of ways.
I tell you the thing that I think the time that that reminisces the most like this was the June after COVID. And I think what happened there though made it even more dramatic. We saw this coming. We saw the work in March, April, May. But back then in June, there was, Scott Cochran had left. They were trying to figure out the Zooms. We had Deontay Lawson saying, "Is anybody here?" He's the only man on the island. It took a while. But as far as like A to Z recruiting, getting to know them, unofficial visits, official visits, and then commitments. I haven't seen this. I mean, and it's the quality of guys too. I mean, they're not just filling a class. They could easily fill a class. They are standing there in the pocket, fist fighting. I mean, Micah DeBose, again, chose Alabama over Ohio State and LSU. Jackson Lloyd chose Alabama over Ohio State. I mean, Michael Carroll, he had Michigan, Penn State, Georgia. I mean, those are some of the top schools in the country they're battling, which is what you'd expect from a top school. So they're in the pocket. They won't win them all, but they're going to land their punches.
What about you, Andrew? Thinking back to the 20 plus years that you've done this, is this new territory for you?
Well, it's new territory just because you have a complete regime change. And Nick Saban, the coach DeBoer, who didn't have a lot of experience in the Southeast, but he surrounded himself with a lot of guys who did have experience in the Southeast and who knew how to recruit. And this is a guy that has a lot of personal relationships, and he's certainly getting a lot of love on the recruiting trail, but it's the entire staff, and you're seeing their ability to bring in top talent. And we talked about this back in right before official visits started. It was more about who else was going to show up on campus this month. We talked about months for the top guys that were on Alabama's recruiting board, the Jackson Lloyds, the Mike Carrolls, guys like that. But who else was going to show up on campus that we weren't really talking much about? Khalid Lockett, 5-star wide receiver, shows up. All of a sudden has Alabama's top 2 or 3. You had Justice Terry come in for an official visit this past weekend. You had Ivan Taylor, Notre Dame commitment, show up for an official visit kind of unexpectedly. So you're getting a lot of new names on campus that are interested in the program. And Alabama, depending on where you look, number 2 or number 3 in the team recruiting rankings right now. We talked about how will they get to 20 by August? That was my prediction. I think we're going to exceed that number, and that but then when you look at the recruiting rankings, it's very possible that they could creep into that that top 2, maybe even top 1.
The thing about the rankings, but
the
thing about the rankings too, like we don't even know who the 5 stars are. We don't know who they're going to be because it's coming down the road, and you go into the senior season, which nobody's watched. All the guys that evaluate. I mean, I still think that On3 is the best. I think 24/7 puts a lot of effort into it. Rivals. I'm not sure how often ESPN does their rankings, but a lot of these guys are going to be seen as seniors. They're going to go to the All-American game, the Under Armour game and stuff like that. They're going to Alabama, Mississippi. There's a lot left to determine. So you could have guys committed. We've already seen guys make massive leaps. Jackson Lloyd, 3-star massive leagues. Lezier Brooks, 3-star massive league. Should actually be higher on the other ones. We expect them to catch up. So that final ranking's up for grabs. There's some fist fighting. Ohio State's a monster. We know what Georgia and Texas and LSU's doing. So, but Bama's in the mix. They're in that top 5 fight, and it's going to come down to a few guys and what choices they make at the end.
Amazing when you really think about it. And before we start getting into the past weekend and more in-depth terms, Andrew, Alabama had its final summer camp over the last 3 or 4 days. And we talked about this late last week. Faison Brandon, the number 1 quarterback right now for the 2026 cycle, was in town. Several new offers. And I know you're going to have more, or you do have more on Brandon's visit.
Yeah, we'll have a complete interview on BOL a little bit later today. So go check that out. Really in-depth feature on his time in Tuscaloosa. Now, Brandon flew into Tuscaloosa on Thursday night. So he spent all day Friday, all day Saturday, spent a little bit of time at the facility on Sunday morning. So he got almost an official visit experience as a upcoming junior in high school. He's the number 1 quarterback in the country out of North Carolina. This is his 3rd overall trip to Alabama, 2nd since the new staff took over. He has high interest in Alabama right now, and there's reason to believe that he's going to be making a decision before the start of his junior season. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see what happens over the course of the next month and a half with him. He said that he's going to release a top 3, maybe top 5 sometime pretty soon. And I expect that to happen this week. Alabama's got a big event on July the 28th. I think they're certainly trying to get him back for that. But really great in-depth interview with him coming up to BOL a little bit later today. So go check that out. But certainly believe that Alabama is going to be in that top group, and they're really pushing hard. So really exciting football player. And we'll see if Alabama can jump on the number 1 player in the country after getting a commitment from the Elite 11 winner.
Tim, player I know you heard a lot of good things about over the run of camp season here is Leo Delaney, a massive 6'6", 270 poundish defensive end, defensive lineman for the class of 2026. What can you tell us about Leo Delaney?
I mean, again, here's a guy, you look at him similar to Jackson Lloyd, 6'6", 275, 16 years old. Jackson was in that 6'6", 280. And again, we've talked about the differences in philosophies of these staffs recruiting and don't get me wrong, Kalen DeBoer and staff are going to go after the big guys. Micah DeBose is a big guy. Mal Waldrop's a big guy. But you can see their tackles. A lot of them are almost like those guys that used to back in the day go to Central Ohio as tight ends, 260 tight ends. Then they grew into the number 1 or a first-round pick at the offensive tackle position. That's kind of what you're seeing now, and that's what this guy is. Top 100, big upside from North Carolina. Again, if we find a new offensive lineman target every week, I won't be surprised, because this reminds me so much of Nick Saban and defensive backs, where you'd have Kirby or you'd have Pruitt plus the DB coach and Saban looking for these guys. I think that's very similar here. And again, Kalen DeBoer is an offensive guy, and I think any true offensive guy knows you got to protect them. You got to give your quarterback time. You make an average quarterback good, you make a good quarterback great. And I think that's always going to be the focus. So another guy, get him on campus again this early. And that's one thing, we talked about being behind in 25, trying to get ahead for 26. They got ahead of 25. And also I feel like they're at worst exactly where they want to be in 2026 at this stage.
Yeah, Delaney's a guy, if you just watch a few of his clips, he's kind of like some of these 2025 commitments on the offensive line that Alabama already has, in that he is so athletic and versatile. You'll see him stand out on both sides of the ball as a high school player. So we'll certainly be tracking Leo Delaney in the days, weeks, and months that come. And now let's talk summer official visitors, the final summer official visitors for 2024. I know you two, again, just dropped nugget after nugget after nugget post visit over the weekend on each one of these guys on BOL. I guess, Andrew, given the series of events and the vibe and the buzz and the momentum that continues to just build for this cycle for Alabama, it was about as good of a weekend as you could have expected in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt they had 12 official visits. We got a lot of positive buzz coming out after the weekend. I mean, we saw the big commitment from Micah DeBose on Saturday night, and then you start seeing a lot of predictions start flying in. Not just from us, but from national guys at On3. So I think obviously getting those guys on campus the final weekend before the dead period. You have a 1 month until it reopens. It's June the 20th, or what is it? June the 25th until July the 25th, and then recruits can start visiting campus for a couple more days in late July. So getting a lot of those guys on campus, big targets. That final weekend, obviously, really important, and we'll see how it kind of shakes out. But there's a lot of positive momentum for Alabama after this weekend, after the entire month. I mean, it was a tremendous month for Alabama. They had 47 official visits from high school players, and you can only have 56. So they got the majority of their guys on campus in the last month, and it's been as the Alabama coaching staff likes to say, it's been a cold summer, and I think July is going to be pretty hot though, because there's a lot of decisions that are going to be happening here pretty soon.
Yeah, but at least for this staff, in some semblance, there will be a break, man. You talk about that many official visitors and what goes into putting all of that on in terms of your coaching staff and your support staff. I'm guessing there's some excited people about their work and what they've accomplished and what looks to be coming, the harvest, so to speak. But wow, if a group of folks ever deserve a break, it's going to be those Alabama folks. Hey, we're going to be joined by Joseph Hastings coming up in just a little bit. Joseph talked with Caleb Cunningham, the 5-star wide receiver from Mississippi, on Sunday. So we'll talk to him about that interview with the standout playmaker. But Tim, a lot of buzz regarding Cunningham's visit. And, he, I guess, going as far as to say Alabama's the leader right now. And when you think about wide receiver in general, I think maybe a month or so ago, there was some apprehension, maybe more so from fans, that, wow, how are we going to fill these spots? But kind of figured with Jamarcus Shepard and Kalen DeBoer and this offense, they would ultimately be able to hone in on the guys they really want. It looks like that's happening too, especially where Cunningham is concerned.
Yeah, I think it was just a matter of being patient. I think, we talked about Coach Shep coming in and watching tons of film and figuring out what he wants. He's got a certain type he wants. Very detailed, how they cut, how they break, where their hands, everything, the potential there that goes into it. We saw Ledzier Brooks when he decided he wanted Ledzier, he went after him and got him. A terrific job there. Now we've seen them just sort of line up. They didn't want a lot. I mean, you got to remember they had a pretty solid class last year, and Ryan Williams. I mean, these guys are going to get on the field and get them the ball. You want to showcase them for future classes. And you want your best playmakers. This ain't little league, rotate in. It's second half of the second quarter, Johnny gets in. So you want your playmakers out there. But yeah, I mean, Caleb Cunningham, thing with Caleb that kind of gives you pause, I think, as an average fan, not so much us, is that he's had leaders before. I mean, when Joseph Hastings interviewed him the first time, he said he didn't even want to go home from Alabama. And then he had the other place. So obviously he's a guy that enjoys the recruiting process. A lot of people say he's trolling. He might just have a great time. We've known guys that had great time on visits. But we do think there's a little bit more here with the Alabama buzz as far as what's been said. I mean, he hasn't made a commitment. I mean, there's still road to, you still got some road to travel to get to that and to get him signed. We're aware, as well as anybody, of what goes into signing a top-ranked player out of Mississippi. But it looks good for Alabama right now, and I think that the Alabama staff did a great job with him, especially Coach Shep.
What about it, Andrew? What's the sense in terms of the tightening up of numbers at that position for this 2024 cycle? Is it real? Are we getting into a situation where it is legitimately a pick and choose sort of ideal opportunity for this Alabama staff?
Yeah, I think so. And we've talked about this on BOL for the last 3 or 4 months, that this was not going to be a big wide receiver class, really, no matter really no matter who wants to jump on board. But they were only going to take 2 to 3 wide receivers. They have Ledzier Brooks, so they're extremely excited about it. They were very eager to get his commitment back in the spring, and now you have an opportunity to close strong at this wide receiver position with some of these guys that they've had visit. And I know a lot of people have been trying to jump in and make predictions over the course of the last couple of weeks on different kids, but we wanted to wait until the very end. Wait until this last weekend of official visits, kind of see how things kind of shaked out. They had Kalik Lockett on campus early last week. Then they had Caleb Cunningham and Derek Meadows, and we didn't really know where things were standing with Caleb Cunningham or Derek Meadows before their weekend trip to Alabama. We knew Alabama was in that top group, but where were they going to be after the weekend? And they certainly made a big move with Caleb Cunningham. But Kalik Lockett still has Alabama in that top group as well. Derek Meadows has Alabama in this top group. We still expect 2 to 3 wide receivers in this class. So over the course of the
total, not 2 to 3. Andrew, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that, Andrew Bone.
They knew what I was talking about.
No, they didn't, because they've asked us 5 times this morning. But
so 2 to 3 wide receivers total.
Thank you.
We don't expect Alabama. They're not going to get 3 or 4 more wide receivers in this class. So it's going to be interesting kind of see how it shakes out. But Cunningham's obviously been predicted to Alabama. Maybe that comes to fruition. But, there's still some other guys that are out there that they really like and they're still pursuing. So it's going to be an interesting couple weeks.
One more thing I want to add, because it happens so often on the round table. They just want to take them all. But here's the thing. Just see, there's a balancing act. We go back, and I mentioned this on the round table this morning. You go back to Alabama having, pushing for 2 running back commitments. They took Richard Young and Justice Haynes. There was at least 2, probably more in the 4 range, guys in the top 100, one in the top 50 that wanted to come to Alabama. You say, well, take them all. You can never have too many running backs. You say that, and then you lose Richard Young or Justice Haynes, and you've lessened the room based on your evaluation. So there's a balance in that. Take 7 offensive linemen, 5 wide receiver might not be on the table. So
Tell you who is on the table right now. Joseph Hastings, recruiting analyst for us there at BamaOnLine.com as we go quad box on a Monday morning. And by the way, thank you all for jumping in here, checking out the show live on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel as of yet, we would certainly appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our YouTube content as it drops right here on the YouTube home for BOL. And while you're at it, if you got a second, a little thumbs up. We'd like a like. If you don't mind, we'd appreciate that. And that would help us out tremendously as well. So let's talk about it, Joseph Hastings. Caleb Cunningham, boy, reading your update. And by the way, I encourage every one of you, if you haven't already, go check out that beauty at BamaOnLine.com. From the last 24 hours or so. Joseph doing a great job, as always, for us at BOL. I'd ask you for some main takeaways from that interview, but I'm going to ask you for some main takeaways, or maybe just 1 or 2, because for me, there were several.
Absolutely. And, I've been talking with Caleb for about a year now. He's someone who's had interest in Alabama going back to, the Nick Saban regime. So, it's carried over to when Kalen DeBoer and Jamarcus Shepard got over there. Jamarcus Shepard paid him a visit in January at his school that landed Alabama in the top 12, and they secured a visit right after in early spring. And Tim mentioned that visit. That visit made a huge impression on him. He scheduled an official visit shortly thereafter. And I said recently on here, I said that visit, the timing of this official visit is key with someone like him who's pretty impressionable with his visits, with a dead period coming up right after. I thought Bama could have some momentum going into the dead period, and they have. He's labeled them as his number 1 school in his recruitment. It just spoke glowingly about the visit, how everything went. He talked about it being a business-oriented type visit, whereas on some of his other officials, it was a little bit more fun than anything else. And that was one thing that really stood out to him. He also talked about Jamarcus Shepard, Kalen DeBoer, his time around them. And, I've spoken with Caleb a lot. This was the one visit, though, following it that he had the most, positive things to say about Alabama, the most glowing of reviews. And it's reflected by the RPM predictions and by him labeling Bama as his leader. So it's really just going to come down to when he ends up making that decision, and obviously, holding on to his commitment after for whomever school gets him, if he ends up making a summer decision, because I do think that he would still want to take some visits in the fall. So yeah, an interesting recruitment, but Bama definitely made a strong impression on him this past weekend, and we'll see what he ends up doing for his decision timeline.
Great update again from Joseph right there with us at BOL on Caleb Cunningham and some other guys that certainly qualify as elite who were campus visitors over the weekend. Tim Watts, Dijon Lee, the 5-star corner from Southern California. The BOL staff put in a prediction for the Crimson Tide with Dijon Lee on Sunday. That word spread like proverbial wildfire. It's been, I guess, an Alabama-Georgia battle for a while. What's kind of putting you over the hump for Alabama in that situation?
Again, some of the first players mentioned basically off the plane, I guess you could say off the bus, when Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan arrived, were Abdul Sanders, Jackson Lloyd, Josiah Sharma, and Dijon Lee. That was the 4 California guys that we knew nothing about, hadn't been strong connection. It was still early, hadn't been strong connections to Alabama, but were very strong connected to them. So we've watched Dijon closely. I don't know what happened. I think he came 3 times in 4 months or something like that. Alabama's always been there. Now, at some point, Georgia became the favorite, and Georgia's definitely in it. But, I mean, he became a Georgia lock at some point. I just looked up one morning, me and Andrew and Joseph were texting. We're like, did something happen? And we're all like, no, we're looking everywhere. Like, did something happen to make us think Georgia was the team to beat? But they have been all in. They got the USC coach they got the former USC coach to work in their secondary. But Alabama's had, Domani, Chuck, Zabian, and he's got a great relationship with Mo and Courtney Morgan. So we felt that Alabama was the team to beat the entire time. We were just waiting to get through these official visits. It's been a dogfight. He commits on Friday. Our prediction is all 3 of us are on Alabama right now.
Big time visitor. And when Tim mentioned SC, previously committed to USC, defensive lineman out of the state of Georgia, 5-star Justice Terry took in an official visit at Alabama over the weekend. Andrew, what can you tell us about that? Is this a situation that you think plays out through the fall? And of course, a lot of folks are going to keep their eyes on the home state Bulldogs there.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see it last through the fall. It probably will, but I do think that we probably see at least a decision happen before the start of the season. Now, his recruitment will probably still last until December until he signs. But this is a kid that Alabama's been on for a long time. Freddie Roach has been recruiting Justice Terry since his freshman year. Kid's been going to Alabama camps almost his whole life, so he's very familiar with the Alabama football program. And this was his first time being around the new coaching staff with Coach DeBoer, but he knows the program inside and out. I mean, he knows the campus well, knows a lot of players on the team. So getting him back on campus shortly after decommitting from USC obviously was a big win there for Alabama. And all you got to do is just get these kids on campus one time. You don't need them on campus 10, 12, 15 times to potentially have a chance to land them. All you need is one. We saw that with Chuck McDonald. We saw that with Ty Haywood. We've seen that with a lot of guys this summer. You get these guys on campus, spend some time with the coaching staff, see everything that Alabama has to offer off the field, and you start feeling a little bit more comfortable about the Crimson Tide. So I think Alabama's done a great job with Justice Terry, bringing him in. He's comfortable around the staff. So we'll see what happens. Everybody assumes that Georgia's, the heavy front runner, that he's going there. There was already predictions that were made for Georgia prior to his weekend trip to Alabama. And hey, you know what? If we were betting men, we would probably all say Georgia as well. But Alabama's in it. They have, they're going to be in it for a while. They're going to try to get him back on campus in late July and just kind of see where that goes. But I think Alabama certainly did enough to put themselves in the conversation this weekend.
Hey, Joseph,
to piggyback real quick on that, not only did he decommit, but they instantly locked him into Georgia and thought a flip was imminent. We thought people were on flip watch. That's why a lot of those picks went in. And then he scheduled his Alabama visit. So maybe not quite the schedule some expected.
Absolutely. Good stuff there. And we will continue to monitor that situation, obviously, very closely with Justice Terry. And speaking of defensive front seven types, Joseph, I know you've interacted with one who was also in Tuscaloosa over the weekend, and Floyd Boucard. Can you give us a little bit more about where that situation sits?
Yeah, so Boucard plays for Miami Central High School now, but previously played at Mobile Christian School. So he has a little bit of a connection there to the state of Alabama. And not only that, the football team too was Sterling Dixon, who also played at Mobile Christian, and got to spend some time around Sterling, some time around some of the other defensive linemen there on Alabama's campus. Scheduled that official visit a couple months ago. Previously was scheduled to visit Oregon the final weekend, but replaced that with Alabama. He set a commitment date for July 20th. He's planning on making his decision then. Pretty much open to all schools based on the conversation that we had. But, Alabama, really showed out to him just in terms of the player development and the history of the program. Really spoke highly of his time with Coach Roach and the other staff members as well. And that's going to be a recruitment watch just in terms of, the numbers along the defensive line, how some things play out with other recruitments. But, Alabama's firmly in the mix there. He's got some top players, Miami, Oklahoma, some other top programs. So, commitment coming up in a few weeks. But he's another one, too, who could potentially keep his recruitment open afterwards. You're going to see a lot of summer decisions being made and then also some visits taken in the fall, too. So, nothing will kind of ever be set in stone, but that's the plan for him right now.
Yeah, be sure, again, to head to BamaOnLine.com for complete interviews like the one with Floyd Boucard and Caleb Cunningham by Joseph Hastings. We've got the nuggets from these two guys in terms of Tim Watts and Andrew Bone, all kinds of intel. We've got the complete weekend of visitors covered for you. We won't get into all of them here on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. So, again, be sure to head to BamaOnline.com for complete coverage of all things Alabama Crimson Tide. So, guys, it's the end of June. dead period coming up. Some people may associate that with sort of downtime, tumbleweeds, so to speak, but there are some big decisions that seem imminent. So even once we enter this dead period, or as we enter this dead period, I don't get the sense, Tim, it's going to be anything but dead for us.
No, I think let's see, we got, Dawson Merritt's a guy, hasn't set a date. We're expecting maybe that's coming up in the next, in the near future that he's going to have a decision. We got Dijon Lee on the 28th. We got Justin Hill on the 3rd. I'm probably missing 5 guys. And even more, we're all right if we know the dates. The problem is some of these guys they're at home. They've got free time. They can't go to campus. So they're sitting at home thinking, talking to their coach, talking to their trainer, talking to their parents, talking to whoever they're close to, and saying, hey, I love this school. I'm ready to go. The urge to commit will be in July. Now, whether a lot of them do it, I don't know. But the urge to commit is there because you've seen so much. Somebody's got you excited. That goes for prospects cross country. You went somewhere that had you excited. So I don't think it's going to be dead by any means. We know of a few. I mean, if nobody commits then other than the ones we know, then it's still going to be busy. It's still going to be a busy month, but there's the ones we don't know. That's the ones, because there are a lot of people saying, to all 3 of us, we're deciding in July. Well, July is, 30 days, 31 days. So there's a wide window there for us.
Yeah. Andrew, Tim hit on some of those names to keep an eye on. They kind of match up for you. Do you have maybe some wild cards that Tim's alluding to there that you don't know for sure in terms of timeline right now, but maybe you wouldn't be surprised if they pop here in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I think you look back at the last few years, and all the decisions were happening in July and August. We weren't really having many decisions happening in June, so you had 8 commitments in the month of June. So, and now they're sitting at 18 total commitments in this 25 class. So, how many more are they going to end up taking? That kind of remains to be seen. But we are going to see a lot of commitments happen between now and August. Tim mentioned a lot of guys. Caleb Cunningham. We certainly expect a decision from him here relatively soon, maybe in July. I think that Khalid Lockett, certainly another guy that we're paying very close attention to kind of see what he ends up doing on the defensive front. Josiah Sharma, been one of Alabama's top defensive line targets for a very long time. Does this potentially come down to Alabama-Texas battle for him? Oregon's also heavily involved there as well. So there's just a lot of guys that we expect to decide soon. A lot of them haven't announced decision dates yet, but there's going to be a lot of decisions happening, and it's going to be a pretty busy month.
Joseph, pretty good mix of offensive and defensive guys that I detect here. So is that what you're looking out for, or you thinking maybe more on the defensive side? Where do you kind of sit with your watch list?
Yes, I think I'm going to go more so with the offensive side, surprisingly. Just Alabama went on such a run during the spring with landing those defensive commitments and, kind of gone on a little bit of a run too here in the summer, landing some top offensive lineman targets and, still in play for another one that we're really looking at in 5-star Ty Haywood. Took an official visit to FSU this past weekend. Was supposed to be at Oklahoma the weekend before, but couldn't go for personal reasons. Those 3 schools along Alabama, those 2 schools along with Alabama, they're really the heavy ones in play for him. And I'm interested to see what he ends up doing too, as far as the decision timeline. Tim kind of mentioned, there's some guys who don't have any dates set yet, who have talked about taking it into the season, but we'll see if they end up moving it up maybe into that July, early August time period. So he's one that we're watching too. Also taking a look at how things are going to play out with the running back position. Anthony Rogers has taken visits elsewhere in the spring and also to Ohio State end of May. What does he end up doing? He's committed in Alabama's class, but Bama's still looking at another running back as well. AK Deer, he recently posted on Instagram a photo from his Alabama official visit a week after taking it. With him looking at his wrist, like looking at the time. He's obviously still in play. Harry Dalton committed to USC, took an official visit last weekend. So, those are a couple names we're looking at with the running back position. But, yeah, there's a lot still left to play out, a lot of dominoes left to tip over.
Yeah, Tim, Joseph kind of hit on some Bama commits taking visits elsewhere. I guess Jaden Harmon, trip to Ohio State, Zamir Smith to Maryland. Do you have a moderate, high, low level of concern where Bama commitments who are tripping elsewhere uh, in your head that you're thinking about right now, or do you feel pretty comfortable with the situation?
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because it's actually people are gonna think you threw me an alley oop here, but we have nuggets we're dropping right after this show that cover
Ah,
a lot of the visitors who went other places, because that's a big part of the game is covering where they come to your place. And we could write great visit, great visit, great visit, great visit by everybody's name. And we'd be right. They've all had great visits. We're also been digging in, talking to the publishers, our national guys, other college coaches we know, trying to find out how they feel over there. But I think overall in general, I mean, you look, a lot of people are kind of griping about the linebacker class. And then, Luke Metz is visiting Georgia. Jamin, Harmon is visiting Ohio State, and Duke Johnson, Auburn, a bitter rival. Abdul Sanders is visiting Tennessee. They were a lot more endearing when they were visiting those schools, we noticed. So far, so good. I mean, there's four inside backers. You still got Miles Johnson trying to figure out what he's going to do. He's taking visits to Florida. I think he go to Ole Miss this last week. So he's taking visits. We expect he could end up somewhere else. But I think overall they did a good job, including with the targets. I feel like they've held their own, because so far, and this is so far, none of their major targets committed elsewhere despite taking visits. Ivan Taylor was at Michigan, for instance. I'm still waiting to see what he does.
yeah, Andrew, it feels like bands of high winds and rain and a hurricane situation where you're trying to just hold on. And then even if you get through that storm, you still got to get to the early signing date, right? With all these guys. But as it sits right now, do you agree with Tim on that sort of assessment?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, you have to hold on until signing day. Alabama may not have to get another commitment after September the 1st, but they got to hold on to all of them because most of these guys are all still being heavily pursued. They're going to take visits this fall. We know that Alabama's still going to recruit other guys that are committed elsewhere. They're still going to keep their eyes open and bring other guys in. And you got to have backup plans. You got to have contingency plans in case one of your guys does decide to flip at the last minute, because there's a lot of schools out there that are trying to flip their top commits right now. And even guys that have not committed to Alabama just yet, once those guys commit, they're still going to be heavily pursued all the way until the end.
Yeah, Joe, we know the offense has been hellacious of late. We kind of expect a lot of offense out of Kalen DeBoer. But what are you getting a sense of in terms of defense and keeping other programs at bay with the guys who are already on that growing and lengthy commitment list?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting narrative and storyline to watch this upcoming season compared to previous years because of that early signing period being moved up from near the end of December to December 4th. So you remember last year, Alabama was able to get Kevin Riley for that last minute official visit weekend, in between his season and in between that signing period. And they were able to land them, in due part due to that visit that he took. So, it's going to be hard to take visits during the season. I've talked with a lot of recruits about that, just the travel of it all, being able to get to other campuses after Friday night games. So, I think the big part is weathering the storm in the summer when, their schedule is completely free and they're taking the officials elsewhere, like Tim mentioned with Abdul, Jaden, Luke, and others, and Duke. And then also just seeing where they end up going in the fall if they end up taking visits too because of that schedule. So yeah, obviously one name we continue to watch is Antonio Coleman. He's visited Auburn since his commitment to Alabama. He flipped from Alabama to Auburn in December and then flipped from Auburn to Alabama in early March. And the Tigers continue to be in play there for him. So yeah, Bone and Tim touched on it. Got to hold on to your guys, even after you land them. But Alabama's class, the way things are shaping up, I don't think it could have gone any better at this point where we're at right now. Number 3 overall in the recruiting rankings and a lot of momentum going into the dead period.
Yeah, it feels like 3 with a bullet, if that's possible, which is crazy when you think about it in those terms. Guys, it's always a lot of fun right here with you on the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel here for BOL, you need to do it right now. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, hit us with a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it greatly. And as I told you earlier, as much as these guys tell you about Alabama recruiting here, it's just a scratch the surface situation. If you want all of their stuff, you need to be with us at BamaOnLine.com. The Roundtable, our premium message board, That's where you want to hang out with thousands of Alabama fans and get premium intel on a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour, day-to-day basis. Anything else, Tim Watts, before we get out of here?
Yeah, a couple things. You don't want to be dating or having someone committed that nobody else wants. So you should want Georgia and LSU, Ohio State. You should want all the top programs in the country after your recruits. If nobody's calling them, you probably got the wrong recruits. And second, I made a lot of people angry last night. I want to be clear. They're like, "Whoa, we made it to the dead period." I'm like, tomorrow's not signing day. Sunday was a number of my friends that love recruiting and people I know who's like, "Woo, we made it." I'm like, "Made it? We're 6 months away. We're at halftime. We got a 3-point lead. We got to hold this lead. We got to." It was just amazing when I told them. They were two of them were so mad at me. I was like, "We're at halftime, but you're leading at halftime, which is better than trailing by 11, with your quarterback injured."
Yeah, that's a good point about if other teams aren't still recruiting your commitments, it may say something about the quality of your commitments, because we saw that not only under Nick Saban, but also your coaches too. And I think that's going to be a big part of this moving forward under Kalen DeBoer. If other schools aren't trying to hire your coaches, you might not have the right coaches. And to take that a step further, I think it's going to go into Alabama's support staff and guys like Courtney Morgan. I think you're going to see other schools try to imitate or implement situations similar. They're going to try to go find their Courtney Morgan, right? They're going to or come after Courtney Morgan. So that's exactly what you want, really. Good point, Tim, from that perspective once again. Hey, guys, again, appreciate you. Always do a great job here for us on YouTube. And then, of course, first and foremost, right there at BamaOnLine.com. Tim Watts, Joseph Hastings, Andrew Bone. I'm Travis Reier. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, so long, everybody.